Darwinian evolution is a plausible, a convincing theory, but it is also a theory with clear limits. And I'm going to talk in the next couple of days about what those limits are in some detail. But I want to begin by spelling out the implications of the theory having these sharp limits. What it means is that the theory explains what it does, but it doesn't explain life. It's true as far as it goes, but it doesn't go all that far. And the champions of evolution, at least the public champions of evolution, people like the biologist Richard Dawkins or the philosopher, the cognitive scientist Daniel Dennett, they show no awareness of these limits. They act as if evolution is some kind of all-purpose explanation. It can account for life. It can account for culture, ethics, human behavior. But this is to go, I'm arguing, way beyond the evidence. So I think that people like Dawkins and Dennett are, I'm going to call them metaphysical Darwinists. Why? Because they smuggle in a whole bunch of metaphysical concepts into their Darwinism. So it's not science. Some people call it scientism, but it's making an ideology out of something that's not an ideology. Biologist Stephen Jay Gould once called these same people Darwinian fundamentalists, and he meant that as an insult. And I think you can see what he's getting at. He's saying they're using a powerful but quite circumscribed theory to account for phenomena, including IQ, that lie outside the theory's actual biological reach. Now, let's focus on the first of the three things that evolution cannot explain. I said yesterday that evolution can't explain three things. The first is the origin of life, or the basic unit of life. I'll come to that. It's the cell. Evolution cannot explain consciousness. And third, evolution can't explain human rationality or morality. But we're going to focus here on the first of those three, the origin of life. Now, Darwin assumed when he advanced his theory that life is already there. So let's start with life, he goes. How do we go from one life form to another? Now, there have been a whole bunch of scientists who have said, well, we think we can find the origins of life, and we think we can even, if we can't find it, which they haven't found, we think we can maybe create life in a lab. In 1953, there was a lot of excitement. A fellow named Stanley Miller, he had generated amino acids by sending an electrical discharge through a combination of water, hydrogen, methane, and ammonia. And people thought, oh, wow, this is showing that life is nothing more than a combination of chemicals. And if we can figure out the right chemicals, the right temperature, the right, quote, conditions, if we can simulate what life might have been like in the very beginning, maybe we can even create some kind of living creature through a pure combination of chemicals. But turns out that the excitement quickly subsided. And it was not only did the experiment didn't go any further, but it became clear that the atmosphere of the early Earth was completely different than the one that Stanley Miller assumed. And so I think where we are now, biologist Franklin Harold, in his recent book on the cell, he goes, the origin of life is, quote, one of the unsolved mysteries in science. This is not to say that science will never solve it, but it's very clearly saying that science has not. Now, let's turn to the simplest living cell. The simplest living cell turns out to be one of the most complicated structures on Earth. It contains more information in it than the Encyclopedia Britannica. The genetic code, this is Richard Dawkins himself, quote, is truly digital in the exact same sense as a computer code. This is Dawkins admitting, and he's talking about the original cell. Dawkins says that each DNA molecule is an algorithm in biochemical code with a built-in capacity for transcription, that would be amazing enough, and replication. The code can multiply itself. Franklin Harold, in his book on the cell, says that the cell, even a bacterial cell, quote, displays levels of regularity and complexity that exceed by orders of magnitude anything found in the non-living world. Besides, quote, a cell constitutes a unitary whole, a unit of life in another deeper sense. Like the legs and leaves of higher organisms, its molecular constituents have functions. Molecules are parts of an integrated system, and in that capacity can be said to serve the activities of the cell as a whole. In other words, the cell is not a bunch of independent units, each doing their own thing. They function in combination as a whole. almost like a kind of strategic attack in a chess game. All the pieces are mobilized to a particular purpose, and each piece is functioning as part of that. So here's the point. There are really 2 points. One, the cell shows the marked signature of design. How could something, a kind of mini supercomputer, be there at the start? And number 2, and this is really the crushing point, this basic template of life did not evolve. Darwin doesn't claim it evolved. Not a single competent biologist in the world says that the cell itself evolved. No, the cell was already there, and the cell then became the basic unit of evolution. Evolution presupposes that this basic template of life, with all its complex machinery of RNA and DNA, came fully formed with the first appearance of life. And scientists have found that the first traces of life go back between 3.5 and 4 billion years, a relatively short time after the Earth was formed. So here's the Earth is formed, and then relatively early on, boom, here comes the cell, here comes life. And evolution can't account for that, and it doesn't even pretend to. So how can the kind of random combination of chemicals automatically produce this highly complex unit called the cell? The simple answer is it can't.